If you ever feel out of control around food, you're not alone, and you're in the right place to learn practical, no-nonsense information about why you binge and how to stop. Binge eating does not mean that something is wrong with you. It's a natural but primitive brain response that you can correct. If you're ready for change, sign up for the Brain Over Binge self-paced online course for less than $20 per month. And if you feel you need personalized support, we also offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. To learn more, go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. I'm Katherine Hansen, your host, and I appreciate you being here today for another episode. Whether this is your first time listening or you're a regular listener, you tuning in shows that you no longer want harmful food behaviors in your life, and you should be proud of yourself for seeking information and support. I hope that some of what I share here will guide you toward feeling completely free of binge eating and related food issues. This podcast is up to episode 163, and there are so many topics that we've covered over the years that you can go back and listen to. And if you need some daily encouragement as you overcome negative habits and build positive ones, you can get my free Brain Over Binge Inspiration Booklet, which is an ebook that contains 31 days of inspiring messages to keep you focused and committed to recovery. You can get the booklet through the link in the show description or on the homepage of brainoverbinge.com. I have a guest on the show today to talk about the important topic of letting go of dieting and diet culture as a whole. This is especially important as we go through the holidays and you may be receiving some potentially harmful messages about food and weight. And also as you face the common cultural pressure to start the new year with a diet or weight loss goal. My guest is Dr. Supatra Tovar, who will share her knowledge and expertise about how dieting creates harm on a hormonal and physiological level, and about how you can unlearn the programming of the dieting industry and how you can learn to work with your own body and not against it to become a healthier version of yourself. Hi, Supatra.
Hi, nice to see you. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. We're going to be talking a lot about deprogramming diet culture, which is also the name of your book, and I'm very happy for you to tell the audience more about that as well. Can you start by just telling everyone a little bit about yourself and what you do in the holistic health education field?
Absolutely. I'm a clinical psychologist, a registered dietitian, and a fitness expert. But I came across all of those designations in the opposite order. I started out as a Pilates instructor, then became a dietitian, and then became a psychologist. And the reason for that through line is the moment I started to work with people in Pilates, I realized I really wanted to help them on a more holistic level. They were coming to me to help strengthen their bodies and embrace a new form of exercise, but they were also coming to talk about their issues and their problems, especially with food, and trying to navigate around, dieting and how they could become their healthiest self. At that time, I was also struggling with dieting and weight gain and realizing that it was kind of a futile effort. And so that's why I went into my dietetics program and got a master's in nutritional science so that I could better understand how the body actually works and how it reacts to dieting. While I was learning that, I realized I didn't still have enough education to be able to truly help someone on a completely holistic level. And that's because I couldn't really get into somebody's mind. I could help them with behavioral interventions. I could help them with motivational interviewing or helping them with specific diet choices. But I really wanted to understand why we get into these cycles of restriction that often lead to binging. But also I was so interested on the complete holistic level, what was going on in people's minds and how that transferred into how they think and act and behave today. So I went and got my clinical doctorate in psychology and have been treating clients in private practice ever since. And, really working in all aspects, but in a concentrated way with my clients with disordered eating and eating disorders. And out of my work with them, that's how I formulated my 7-step method essentially to help people recover from eating disorders and to reformulate their relationship with themselves and their food. And that's how I developed the Deprogram Diet Culture course and the book Deprogram Diet Culture, Rethink Your Relationship with Food, Heal Your Mind, and Live a Diet-Free Life. It's a culmination of the work I did on myself and the work that I'm doing with my clients.
Yeah, that's so inspirational, just how you got into the work being a Pilates instructor, and then you saw a need and you kept seeking more and more education to help people in all areas, with their food,
Mhm.
with their thinking. So I love that you've just continued to improve yourself so that you can improve how you help other people.
Well, there's kind of a fun story. When I was interviewing to go into my clinical psychology doctorate program, the person interviewing me asked why I wanted to switch directions and go from nutrition to psychology. And I just looked at her kind of dumbfounded because I was like, I'm not switching from anything, I'm enhancing something. And this was, I think, before nutritional psychology really it's now becoming more mainstream. A lot of people never saw mental health tied to nutrition, and they are intricately linked. And so that's why I think this designation of being a psychologist, a dietitian, and a fitness expert is so helpful to enhance your overall health. It's not just how your relationship with yourself and your food. It's also your relationship with your partner. It's your relationship with work. It's everything. And so having those three educational backgrounds really helps me be able to see a client on a fully holistic level and be able to ask them, well, what are you eating? And maybe we can look at that in order to help improve your mood, to help reduce your depression, to help lower your anxiety. And when we're able to do that, they just see so much improvement, so much more than they would just from conventional talk therapy.
Yeah, I love that because the mind and the body are so intimately connected and bidirectionally as well. What we eat affects the mind, and what we
Yeah.
think affects what we eat and affects the body. So just being
Yeah.
able to work with both the mind and the body is something I think is so needed in this field. I know that just for an example, in anorexia, when people are so starving and their bodies are so deprived of food, that nutritional deficiency causes a lot of the mental health issues that we see, like
Yes.
depression, anxiety, and I think we missed that for a long time. And so I love that you bring the mind and the body together and see the powerful effect of nutrition on our moods and on our mental health.
Yeah, I think in the past, anorexia treatment was really just focused on get them food,
Mhm.
not what type of food to get them. And I understand the psychology behind it, but people who develop anorexia tend to have fear foods, tend to have off limits foods, obviously. And so when you're in residential, you're inundated with the fear foods. But it's not necessarily that helpful for them to improve their mental health if they're eating foods that they consider less healthy, like processed foods or packaged cheese and the lunch meats and things like that they've avoided for so long. Actually, introducing that back in, I understand psychologically why that's important because we want to reduce a restrictive mindset, but we also need to improve their mental and physical health. And we can do that in a better way by providing them with very healthful and nutritious foods. I try to shy away from saying good or bad foods because I don't believe in any, of the moralization of food, because that often leads to restriction and binging. But when we look at foods on a continuum or a spectrum from less healthy to more healthy, the more healthy foods enhance our mental health. And once people, especially with anorexia, who have had malnutrition for years, actually introduce more healthful foods to their diet, then they start to improve in their depression and in their anxiety, and they're able to think more clearly and see how their behaviors are impacting their health. But it's much harder when they're inundated with less healthful foods.
Yeah, all that is really, really interesting. And there's the effect that malnutrition and starvation and deprivation, even if you're not anorexic, just not getting enough calories in your body has profound mental health effects.
Yes.
So I love that you teach people that. And it also has effects, like you said, in creating a drive to binge, right? Because our body has a powerful reaction to being starved, to not getting enough
Yes.
calories. And I know that you and I both teach very similar things regarding dieting and regarding helping people give up dieting, because dieting is not a path to healthy weight loss. It actually
No.
works against us. So I know you have a very unique and well educated and researched perspective. So I'd love to dive into more of how dieting harms us, really on a scientific and hormonal level.
Absolutely. So when you look at restriction itself, we usually, if you're a kind of normal adult, will be ingesting about 2,000 to maybe 3,000 calories a day, sometimes even more. So when you look at dieting itself, most diets operate off of a 1,200 calorie or less diet per day, which is not enough to fuel a toddler. So when you've gone from, 2,000 to 3,000 calories and you cut that in half, what it does is it tells the body, oh my gosh, we are in danger. It signals to the body, especially when you're ignoring your hunger cues, primarily the rise in ghrelin that comes from not having enough food. You're sending even more signals to the body that you're in danger. And if you look at this from an evolutionarily minded perspective, we are evolutionarily designed not to let go of our calories because of the feast and famine periods of our past. And that meant that our body was trying to essentially maintain the caloric level, maintain the amount of fat, maintain around the amount of muscle and water that we had so that we stay alive. So the body then goes into all of these different processes. It starts to note exactly the proportions of fat and muscle and water that we had at the beginning of the diet. And it's trying to remember that so that it can go right back to that level the moment dieting stops. And then it also goes into another process called suppressed thermogenesis. And thermogenesis is just the burning off of our fat stores. And when we go into this restrictive diet, our body holds on to the fat because it has the most calories, per gram essentially in our bodies. So we want to hold on to this in this restrictive period. So you might be losing muscle and you might be losing water, but your body's really desperately trying to hold onto the fat. So dieting is deceptive. You might be losing this muscle and water and thinking, yay, I'm losing weight, but you're not losing the type of weight that you want to be losing. And so when you go off the diet, your body then gets that signal, oh, okay, we're safe now. We're not in danger anymore. And what it does is it slingshots us back. And it does it through this process called compensatory hyperphagia, which just basically means to make up for what was lost before, we're going to eat a whole lot. And so it's kind of an involuntary process. And if you've ever dieted, you've experienced this feeling once you've allowed food back in. It's almost like your Cookie Monster, like nom, 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 and eating as much as you can. And that's your body's way of trying to protect you. So dieting in and of itself is futile. You may have periods of success, but you will usually have periods of that compensation that leads you back to weight gain.
Yeah, people think dieting is the only way to weight loss, but like you just explained, hormonally, it sends us into a state that we actually want to eat more than we ever did before we dieted. It increases our hunger hormones, it decreases our fullness hormones, it makes us prone to binge eating. And you end up in this yo-yo cycle that suppresses the metabolism. So a lot of feedback I get is people think, oh, you're telling me to give up dieting. That means you're telling me to give up being healthy and to give up maintaining a healthy weight. It's actually the opposite. Giving up dieting is a healthy change. It opens you up to be able to truly nourish your body, which
Totally.
is good for your mental health as well.
Totally. And I think people get really confused in diet culture. I think right now, especially, we have received some really, really messed up messaging. Primarily, everybody right now is you have to eat as much protein as you possibly can and cut all the carbs that you possibly can. And when you really look at this from a dietitian standpoint, it like makes me want to scream and cry and run and hide, because our body is designed to run primarily on carbohydrates. And carbohydrates, I think a lot of people get confused, and that they think it's just like white rice and white tortillas and things like that. Carbohydrates are all grains, beans, legumes, and fruits and vegetables. The bonus of beans and legumes is that they're also very high in protein, and that all of those foods support our health. And if you look at all of the blue zones, people who have lived well past 100, who are really healthy and vibrant, their diet is primarily carbohydrates. They actually ingest very little animal sources of protein. And that's because of their, economic status throughout the years. But that actually is the healthiest diet, for longevity. And it's varied across these blue zones, but they have that in common. And so we see that we're just inundated with a lot of lies. And I think once you actually start to just reject diet culture by not watching these ads, by cleaning up your social media feed, by trying to create limits and boundaries around people who are, trying to get you to diet, and you really tap into your body and you start to listen to your body, you realize that over time, your body's going to give you all of these signals about what it really, really likes. And I got to tell you guys, the body loves carbohydrates. It's what helps your brain function at its best. It what fuels the production of ATP, especially in your muscles, to give you energy and to help you build muscle. So when you actually really tune into your body and you listen, and you're allowing all foods, you're not restricting anything, your body will tell you, well, it's okay to have a few potato chips, but after a while, it's like, ugh, my mouth tastes terrible. Then if you're eating something on the more healthful side, your body is like giving you all sorts of messages like, yes, 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 this is what I want. Yes, I can think. Yes, I'm not depressed. Yes, I can move. This is great. So it really does open up all possibilities for you. And I think that that's the most freeing way to live, because you can enjoy some of those kind of less healthy foods whenever you want. But if you're really listening to your body's telling you exactly how much it wants and needs. And if you honor that, your body's happy.
Yeah, what do you think about just individualization of the way people eat? Because I try to teach people not any one specific way of eating. Some people's bodies tell them to have more carbs. Some people's bodies tell them to have more protein based on our different genetics and needs and lifestyles. So how do you teach that as far as just really personalizing each person's way of eating?
Well, I personally don't tell anyone what they should or shouldn't eat.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's really important. I think the most important thing that they can do is tune into their body and really, really listen, because you actually get a lot of like mental and just, sort of intuitive cues as to what you want to eat or need to eat. I think for me, sometimes I'll see a giant bowl of chili in my head, or I'll see, some pasta, or I'll see Indian food, whatever it is. And I allow myself that food. And I think it's really important that people understand nutrition. So I'm happy to, inform them about what's healthful and what's less healthful. But most people actually already know that. And so I think really helping them to tune into their own bodies is the most important thing, because if you tell someone what to eat, you're actually going back into more of that diet culture realm. And I don't think that that helps people. And I don't think that that empowers them. So I think it's really important not to give a diet plan, not to tell them what to eat, unless they have certain, very important dietary needs that they will need a little bit of intervention. I hope that if that
Yeah,
makes
it
sense.
it really does. And I think it's helping people learn to trust themselves. Because if
Yeah.
if you are so used to following a diet plan and like you talked about eating a very low amount of calories and restricting certain food groups, and then you have a vision, like you said, of a big bowl of chili, you might think, oh, I shouldn't do that. That's wrong. It's against my diet. It's really learning to honor those, cravings and deciding which ones to follow and which ones maybe aren't as helpful to you. So, yeah, it's just all about self-trust. So I love that you help people reclaim that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that is so important for anyone who is recovering from an eating disorder. They really have spent so much time in this restrictive realm, telling themselves what they can and can't eat. And every client that I have worked with and have helped to remove all of those restrictions, that's actually, along with listening, really listening to our hunger and our fullness cues, has helped them recover from their eating disorders in this really joyful way. Every time I meet with a client who's gone 6 months, a year, longer without any dieting, it's amazing to have conversations with them because they're so happy, they're so joyful, they're listening to their bodies, and they're allowing foods that they never thought they could allow before.
Yeah, I find that people think they're so out of control or they're powerless over certain foods or even that they're addicted to certain foods. And that
Yes,
conversation about food addiction, that's a longer conversation, but just for the example here is when you're restricted, it really amps up the pleasure that you're getting from these foods and the reward value of these foods. So they are
totally.
more appealing. You crave them so much more than when you're nourished. When your body's actually nourished, you're listening to your body, you're feeding yourself enough, you realize these foods actually don't have power over you. They're not even that big of a deal. You can eat them, you can stop. So people who really once thought they were completely addicted to foods that are high in sugar, let's say, for example, when they're nourished, they actually realize they aren't addicted to these foods at all.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think the whole conversation about food noise right now, especially in relation to the new weight loss medications, is really interesting to me because I work with a lot of people who have experienced what they call food noise, and I think it's really interesting because the food noise, what I have observed in my practice, occurs when people are really binging on more of the highly processed foods. I think it's really interesting that it's primarily these, fast foods or highly processed foods that are kind of bringing up food noise. When you look at that, there's kind of an insidiousness to the food industry. I don't want to like bash any food industry, but they do hire scientists and they call them craveability experts. And what they do is they design food chemically to become, more addictive, essentially, more palatable, more craveable. And so a lot of people get into the food noise realm because of restriction. They're told you can't eat any of these highly processed foods. They're the devil. Don't eat the cake. Stay away from the fast food restaurants. And what that ends up doing is creates a psychological craving along with a physiological craving when you're restricting. And that's what usually drives people to quote the bad foods, right? And when they're binging out on the bad food, it actually creates temporary, and I love it to say that it is temporary, addiction to these foods because of these food scientists, because they've made them so craveable. So when you start to eat them, yes, it just ramps up your dopamine. It, creates this like kind of euphoric feeling, and it's temporary and it's short lived and it promotes the additional binging of these foods. But when you remove the restriction, you remove the psychological craving. You also remove the physiological craving. And when it becomes just another food that you have the option of eating and you're really tuned into your body, you realize that that high that you're getting from the food is temporary. And it's also deceptive. And oftentimes, what I will see with my clients is that they will start to open up and allow for those kinds of foods, but they'll go get them in a restaurant or they'll make them at home. And when they're making them at home or even in the restaurants sometimes, they add a lot of salt and sugar and fat to make things really palatable. They're also not usually adding a whole bunch of, chemicals and additives. What happens is the food noise actually goes down. And it's really about kind of letting go of the more highly processed foods that are designed to do this and incorporating all of these foods more naturally that gets rid of that food noise.
Yeah. Yeah. Giving up restriction is just so fundamental. And then, like you said, when you do eat these foods, it creates this reaction in your body. And what I teach people is that can become habitual as well, like that your body
Yeah.
gets conditioned to crave those things and it gets conditioned to crave the massive amounts of foods that people are eating in binges. So it's really a two-part process. You have to nourish your body and eat enough. And then you also have to understand your mind and the cravings and the habit, and that you know that you have power to break the habit and you have power to
Mhm.
experience these urges and not follow them. And I like that you're teaching people to change their habits, to develop new ones, maybe to cook at home, to find desserts that don't create that same reaction. So, yeah, I mean,
Mhm.
eating enough and breaking the habits are fundamental.
Absolutely. And I think when we change habits, we often do it in that kind of New Year's resolution kind of mentality. Like,
Mm.
I'm just going to stop this and I'm going to quit smoking and I'm going to run a marathon. I'm going to climb Mount Everest or whatever your giant resolution is. And I encourage people to actually go completely to the other end of the spectrum and make very, very small and tiny changes. For example, say that they did want to stop binging and they did want to start eating more mindfully. Well, you could look at this as an all or nothing mindset and then, never allow all these foods again. And then you have to spend every meal and take an hour and really savor every bite and eat. No, people don't have time for that. That is totally not realistic. That would be great. It's really wonderful when you're a monk and that's all you have to do for that hour. But most people are not like that. And most people are really busy. So I encourage people, make your snack mindful. Make it a habit that you engage in every day because that habit is going to bleed out into your other meals naturally. Once you realize how great it is to slow down and take time with your food and really taste it and focus on that, not doom scrolling, not watching TV, you really see that it's this beautiful, peaceful act, but it's a small, tiny act. So I encourage people, keep it very, very small.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to get more into the deconditioning or deprogramming diet culture. Your book is titled, I wrote it down, Deprogram Diet Culture, Rethink Your Relationship with Food, Heal Your Mind, and Live a Diet-Free Life. And this idea of deprogramming diet culture is a really big topic. We could probably do another 2 hours talking about this or more because it's something that gets so ingrained in people from when they're very young. So how do you
Yeah.
get started and how can people listening get started in deprogramming diet culture?
Well, I think the first step is really to analyze diet culture for what it is. I think a lot of people are inundated with media and they don't really think about it. But diet culture in and of itself is based on two really insidious biases. The first one is lookism, or the unhealthy pursuit of the thin ideal, along with weightism, which is basically fat shaming or fat phobia. It's bias against people who have any kind of overweight or obesity. So we're inundated with all of this messaging, whether it's from what we're watching on TV, and you also see it in industry. When you look at industry itself, it is all designed to make you feel like you're less than, to make you feel like you're not good enough, and to make you buy stuff that you don't necessarily need. So when we actually really open our eyes and become objected to it, we can ask ourselves, is this serving me? How is this serving me? Or is this making me feel worse about myself? Raising objectivity and our mindfulness can really empower us because then we can see, it's like pulling back the little curtain on the wizard and seeing the little guy behind it, basically trying to manipulate us into buying things we don't need. So I encourage people to do this in their social media feed. I encourage people to completely reprogram their feed. If they are seeing images and people and celebrities that make them feel terrible about themselves, you don't have to watch that. You have agency. You have control. You can hide, you can block, you can unfollow. And then you can go towards content that makes you happy. Like for me, it's puppies and kittens and Kevin Bacon and his wife, Kira Sedgwick, singing to their goats on their ranch. Like that, those kind of things, like I could watch it all day. It's so awesome. And so you can fill it with content that makes you happy, that inspires you, that makes you laugh. And the algorithm is then going to give you more of that. So you can empower your feed. And I love it when people do this. I love doing it for myself. And every time I look at social media, I'm inspired. I am not depressed. The next thing you can do is you can really get discerning about advertising, especially in social media. I hide it. If I see it, I'm like, nope, nope, nope. I'm telling, Meta and all the, the big guys that, no, I don't want to see this. Thanks, but no, thank you. And to really try to avoid watching commercials of any kind or reading fashion magazines. I know we need industry. I know we have to sell things, but we have the power to choose wisely industry that will support us or industry that hurts us. And I think we have so much power with our wallets. And if we're all very objective and discerning and we decide that this doesn't serve us, oh my gosh, we could completely shape industry, which would be so cool. Finally, I think it's really important to examine the relationships in our lives and to look and see if there's any toxic relationships. I'm not saying to end relationships at all, especially family members. I mean, we all have people in our lives who are trying to promote their diet mentality or trying to tell us to lose weight or over exercise or commenting on our bodies. We can create boundaries around people like that. And we can also redirect conversations so that they're not harmful to us. And then we can gravitate towards the people who really support us and love us just as we are and who support our journey to becoming our healthiest self. So once we do that and we eliminate these influences, then it just becomes all about tuning into our bodies, listening to ourselves, and trusting ourselves. And that is such a loving place. That is such a wonderful place to be that is supportive of our mental and physical health. So that's my hope for people.
Yeah, I feel like that's some good practical steps that people can take. And yeah, like you mentioned, maybe if we all start doing these things, diet culture could change as a whole. But for right now, you really have to look at yourself and what you can do and the fact that you have agency and you can make choices. And just because all this stuff is out there doesn't mean you have to fall into it, and you can redirect your attention and your focus onto what really matters to you.
Absolutely. That's my hope for people. We're heading towards the holidays. I'm not sure when this is going to air, but I really hope that, especially like holiday time, New Year's time, summer bikini body time. Like there's so many times of the year where diet culture can really rear its ugly head. And I'm really hoping that people are awake when they are seeing this and they can realize that they don't have to fall prey to this, that this is manipulation. This is designed to make them, shell out dollars to an industry that does not necessarily care about them. And then they can actually put their money towards something that is helpful, healthy, good for them, positive for their mental and physical health.
Yeah. I want to ask you, as we're talking about diet culture, because right now we're in a unique period of time where there has been this rise of the GLP-1 drugs, which you mentioned earlier, the Wegovy and Ozempic, and this has really added flame to the fire of diet culture. And I work with a lot of people who aren't sure how to handle that. And, all the advice you've given so far, I think could also apply to that. But I'm wondering if, as a clinical psychologist, as a registered dietitian, how do you advise people, or what is your opinion here? And I know that's a big question. I feel like everything I've asked you so far has been a big question, but if you want to weigh in, that would be great.
Well, I think it's important to give people the space to explore and talk about it. And I do encourage that in my practice. I think it's really important that people ask questions and find out about these medications and really are educated about them, to see these medications exactly for what they are. They were designed to help people who were in the, more dangerous stages of type 2 diabetes primarily. And that was in order to help them so that they could get their diabetes under control. But it became very, very seductive for diet culture and anyone who wanted to lose weight. Oh, there's an easy way. I can just take this injection and I'll be fine. I'll lose the weight and then poof, everything will be great. That's not how these work. They are designed to help suppress your appetite and slow down digestion. So both of those two things can be a very, very slippery and not so great slope if you have a lot of the mentality, especially that comes out of diet culture, where we're taught to ignore our hunger and to try to eat as little as possible. The body doesn't like that. If you look at Ozempic and Wegovy and these medications themselves, they're not that different from restricting. They just give you a boost in terms of how to be able to handle, like you're not necessarily dying of hunger because your hunger hormones are suppressed, right? And food stays longer in your body. But what's also happening are some potentially, not so pleasant side effects. You can get nausea, you can get diarrhea, constipation. You can even have gastroparesis or the complete paralysis of your gastrointestinal system. So what you're doing with this medication, especially if you're just trying to do it for vanity weight loss, is you're putting your body through a whole host of very unpleasant side effects and effects of the medication. And the body is actually kind of listening as this is going on. It's like, okay, I'm becoming malnourished. This is not good. And a lot of people who are really not taking care of their nutrition can see a lot of foggy brain, states. They can go into depression and anxiety because they're malnourished. It's not that different from people who have anorexia. And so you have that problem happening at the same time, especially if people aren't learning about proper nutrition and what the body wants and needs. In addition, you tend to have to be on this medication for life. Even if you're just trying to do the vanity pounds, what will most likely happen for most people is that most people actually can't even stay on long enough to go on to the optimal dose. About 2/3 of people I saw in a study recently go off the medication before they even reach an optimal dose. But if you actually reach that optimal dose, you get the weight that you desire and you go off the medication, then you usually go through the same process of compensatory hyperphagia, and you'll go right back to the weight that you started from. So in my opinion, when you look at these weight loss medications, primarily for weight loss, we're going to take the type 2 diabetes management out of the picture. It's no different than going on a highly restrictive diet, having your body go into the starvation mode, and then coming back and slingshotting right back to the weight that you were having before. So when people actually do this deep dive and they do the education and then they do the math about how much they might be spending, they often go, well, I don't know. It's like a lot. How can I do it naturally? I'm not one to say or promote weight loss, but if people want to lose weight, that's their perspective. But there's a way that they can go back to their most natural, healthy weight without any of that. And that's by actually honoring their body and tuning into their body. And when you're in harmony with your body, when you're truly listening to it, your body often just naturally goes to a healthy weight. So I think that is a sustainable long-term approach. Diet culture doesn't promote that. They promote quick fix. And so it's hard for people at first to realize it's a slower process. But what I've seen with all of my clients who really struggled with binging primarily is that they're returning to their natural healthy weight slowly, but successfully, and without any of these relapses. without any misery, and with joy, and actually being able to enjoy food, which, is what keeps us alive. We should enjoy food. I think that that's what's missing in diet culture, is that it takes the enjoyment out of it, but we can actually enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think that's some reprogramming that needs to be done in people as far as being okay with the gradual weight loss. Like if binging has you over your natural weight, if you've eaten all this excess food because of dieting and because of binging, then it's not going to come off overnight. And really having people be okay with that and understand that the only way it's going to be sustainable, the only way it's going to be healthy long term is if you do it in a way that you're caring for yourself, that you're enjoying food, that you're nourishing yourself, you're giving yourself enough. Yes, you're removing the excess of the binging, but you're not depriving yourself. And I think where these weight loss drugs come in, and again, I'm not a doctor, so I can't advise people, on medical necessity. Like you said, there are some medical needs for these in some cases, but if it's just for weight loss, it's promoting the idea that starvation is the answer because it helps someone, quote unquote, helps because it's actually harmful to starve themselves without that biological reaction that we talked about earlier. Like the body fights to get you to eat, to increase your hunger hormones, to decrease your fullness hormones. So the drugs kind of suppress that temporarily while causing a lot of other side effects. So it really is promoting this harmful idea that starvation is the answer. And it's trying to, help you starve yourself, which, like you said, the body knows. The body still understands it's being malnourished. The body still is going to fight back. You can't stay on these forever. So I appreciate you going into that with me because it is such a big thing in our society and it is such a big part of diet culture today as we're recording this.
Absolutely. And I have a client who did try Wegovy for a couple days and was absolutely frightened at how little she wanted to eat and was, having a lot of difficulties, problems with fainting, problems with just general energy, that it scared her so much that, thankfully she went off of that. And I think it really is about wrapping our minds around the fact, and diet culture is so good at lying to us, that there is no quick fix. There is no instant way. You can't just, and we've seen it in so many different forms. Bariatric surgery. If I just reduce the size of my stomach, yes, it, can be successful for some people, but it also has a high rate of relapse. We can see it with these weight loss medications today. We can see them in the weight loss medications of the past. We can see it in every single diet on the planet. None of them, if there was a quick fix that actually worked, really, truly worked without harming us, it would have already been invented. And even though there's a lot of hype around these weight loss medications as, oh, it's going to cut your cardiovascular disease. Oh, it's doing this for addiction. Yes. And all of that is good. But is all of that sustainable? And is it enjoyable? How are you going to go into the holidays when it's all about, gathering and eating great food? How are you going to go into the holidays without distress, without impairment? It's not sustainable in the long run. And I really hope people catch on to the idea that you can do this naturally. You just have to tune into yourself and listen to your body as opposed to denying your body.
I love that you help people kind of return to basics to see that, hey, our bodies actually know. And giving up dieting does not mean giving up health. So I really love that you just really help people get that message. And can you let people know how they can get your book, how they can learn more about you, and just get more information?
Definitely. I have two websites. So, it's a lot to keep up with, but I have my practice website, which is drsupatratovar.com, which is drsupatratovar.com. And that's where you can come to me for my clinical work. I'm licensed in California, Colorado, Illinois, and soon to be New York. I also have associates who work with me, and you can get therapy through me on the website. There's also all of my social handles on that website. For the book, for the course, for speaking engagements and all other things, you can go to anew-insight.com, anew-insight.com. And there you can find ways to get the book. It's in all the major bookstores, Amazon, and all of the things.
And I'll put those links in the show description. And you also have a podcast too, which you interviewed me for recently, and that's called the A New Body Insight Podcast.
Yes, we are pod swapping, and you were my guest, and it was so wonderful to be able to pick your brain because your book has been very meaningful to so many people. I actually found out about your book through my client who was struggling with binging and really gained a lot of insights from your book. And so when we found each other on Instagram, I was like, oh my gosh, we have to talk to each other. So I was so glad that you agreed to pod swap with me.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been so helpful, and I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you'll join me again next time. And in the meantime, if you need additional support to end binge eating, you can find all of the Brain Over Binge resources in the show description. And these resources include my books, one-on-one coaching and group coaching, as well as my online course, which is only $18.99 per month with no commitment. I hope those of you who celebrate have a happy Thanksgiving this week. And as always, I want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the hosts of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey. Need more help? You can find all of our current and upcoming options for support at brainoverbinge.com.